Hi. So I'm Steve. I don't speak Polish, and so apologies for that. If you've got any questions, if you just want to interrupt me at any point while I'm speaking, because I'll probably talk quite quickly as well, because I'm nervous. So if you've got any point, just shout out, and I'll try and explain it more slowly. So I've been with William Hill for 10 years now. I joined in 2006. When I joined, the security team was a small team. There were 4 of us. I joined because I had experience managing firewalls, and that was kind of what the security team did. We managed firewalls, antivirus on desktops, laptop encryption, and proxy servers that we use for filtering web traffic. Then I think it's about 2008. We were getting our bank threatening to fine us because we didn't we weren't PCI compliant. So then we had to start doing security a little bit more seriously. So I've been the tech lead on 2 PCI programs. I've designed all of the controls and mitigations we put in place to achieve PCI compliance. So I've been unpopular for a long time. I upset a lot of people with the controls that we put in, taking away people's access to various things. So if you are thinking about being in security, don't expect to be popular. I think it's about 2008, I started getting involved in the secure development life cycle and looking at building security controls in there. And there's been various management changes within William Hill where security has been built up and knocked down, but since about 2011 I've been building up the department. We've gone from a small, I started in 2011 with 3 of us. We've now got a big team that covers, we've got people based in Tel Aviv, Gibraltar, the UK, and soon here. We are recruiting, but anyway. So yeah, it's grown massively. We now have distinct functions for security architecture, for security operations, security assurance. And in that growth, we've gone from being managed by, I've been a junior manager as a sort of team leader, to in 2014 we appointed our first CISO, which was Chief Information Security Officer, which is a big thing. We sacked him after 6 weeks, but the second one we got was actually pretty good. So we are taking it seriously. I haven't put my slides on. So what I was going to talk about today is how we manage the threats that we deal with. So it seems that most of the security industry these days is talking about advanced persistent threats, APTs, zero-day attacks, that kind of thing. It's all very malware focused and internal networks, but it's like we don't think about attacks coming from the internet, which is daft really, because there's lots of them. So this map here shows over the last, I think this is going back about 6 months, all the different countries that we've been attacked from. We get about 10, there's around about 10,000 new IP addresses every week popping up, actively looking at our website for vulnerabilities. Now, what surprised me when we were looking at the statistics for this was I assumed that a lot of the traffic would come from the just generic scans, because there are people that just sit there and scan network ranges looking for vulnerabilities, and then they come back later on where they get a positive hit, like looking for maybe WordPress admin pages, for example. But it turns out that only makes up about 3 to 4% of the malicious traffic that we see. So most of it is actively targeting williamhill.com. And looking at the world coverage that we get, that actually means that in certain circles, we're more popular than Christmas. Sorry, can you not hear me? These are actually people targeting us, looking for vulnerabilities in our applications, in our infrastructure. it works out about 340 new IP addresses a day. So if there are any weaknesses out there, people are going to find them. So in more specific attacks, what we do see a lot of are, on top of those attacks looking for vulnerabilities, is a diagonal brute force attacks. They're also called account takeover attacks, or Akamai have started calling it account stuffing, which is a bit weird. But basically this is brute force attacks. People get big lists of usernames and passwords, they load it up into a tool, and then they fire it at us from a botnet. And they work through their list of usernames and passwords to see what accounts they can get into. Once they get into accounts, they want to use, they might try and resell them, or they might try and commit fraud, or try and steal the money in the account. So within gaming, criminals like online gaming, because we can't put the same level of controls in that banks do, and yet we still have accounts with money in. So when I log onto my online banking, it normally takes me about a minute to get in, but then generally it's not normally time critical, apart from when I've gone overdrawn and I'm going to get charged if I don't transfer money in by 11. But with the online gaming, especially with in-play betting, odds are changing by the second, so people want to be able to get their bet on as quickly as possible. And if our customers are taken through lots of authentication steps to be able to go and log on and place that bet, they will go to another competitor. So we cannot afford to put the same level of controls in that banks do. But we have accounts that have money in, and some people keep quite a lot of money in their gaming accounts. So criminals like that kind of thing, so we're a big target. And the reason that brute force attacks work so well is because people like to reuse usernames and passwords. Nobody likes to remember lots of different usernames and passwords. Lots of people don't use password safes and password generators. So whenever there is a big breach somewhere, so the Yahoo's the big one in the news, there's 500 million credentials, customer account details have been leaked. There's some debate over how easy it is to decrypt the passwords for that, but LinkedIn had a breach. Most of them seem to have been about 2012 or 2014, and have only just surfaced recently. But Adobe lost 38 million. I can't remember, LinkedIn was about 70 million. So there's a lot of usernames and passwords available. And there's even there's a security researcher called Mark Burnett, who I really don't like. He's been doing research into breaches for a lot, and in 2014 he decided to release his research, which included a database of 10 million usernames and passwords. Now, he said he was anonymizing them because he took the domain names off, so he turned them from email addresses into just the usernames, but that was formatting them perfectly for our website. I wasn't impressed. So, we see a lot of when we get these botnets hitting us there. I think the biggest botnet I've seen in a single attack was 31,000 devices. We've seen, we often see it from compromised servers. There was one attack we've seen which looked like it was coming from ADSL routers belonging to two ISPs. I can't prove that, but all of the attack traffic was coming from two UK-based IPs, and they were both named as having routers vulnerable to a thing called misfortune cookie, which meant that the routers that they were giving to customers were vulnerable to remote takeover. So the way we detect these attacks normally is by monitoring for unique usernames per IP address. So we have to count, which does mean the attackers get a few goes before we spot them. And we also have to be careful there because mobile gateways, so certainly in the UK, the big mobile providers, they have gateways, so we'll see all of their customer traffic gets funneled through a gateway, and then we'll see lots of different customers coming from the same IP address, which is also indicative of an attack. So we need to be careful about what we do block and tune our monitoring so we can accommodate lots of people coming from a mobile gateway, but also spot somebody from the same IP address trying lots of different usernames and passwords. So that's tricky. Now, once we've been alerted to an attack that way, then we move on to writing attack signatures, and this is the more interesting bit. So once we've identified it, we look at the login request. This is a very simplified login request. But the attackers will write that by hand generally. They'll write this, and then they'll send that to our website. So it's easy, it's scripted, they can send it and they distribute it across the botnet. But they always make mistakes, or there's always something you can find in these requests that you can write a regular expression for, and then capture as it comes in, then you just block everything. And it doesn't matter whether they're doing slow and low attacks and distributing across lots of IP addresses and going so slow that they're coming below the thresholds where we detect them, because we'll catch all of them. I mean, this is just an example. Actually, I wrote this one, and I used some of the anomalies that we've seen from various attackers. So you kind of, I don't know, it's interesting for me. You might not think so, but there's lots of mistakes in here. So, for example, at the top there, we've got the use of HTTP1. Like, nobody uses that anymore. So that's suspicious in itself. This one here, there's an underscore there between EN and US, and that should be a hyphen. And no web browser puts a colon on the port number for an HTTPS request, but automated tools do. What else did we see? We've seen one there, cookie back. I don't even know what they were trying to do there, to be honest with you. That's a non-existent header. What else is there? And this one as well here, this is another one that we've seen there, and I think, you know, the attacker, when he was typing away, he should have put a colon there and had none this side of the colon, but so these are kinds of easy ones. Sometimes you have to look at it when you're looking at the requests where they're trying really hard and they don't want to be detected. So they'll do things like rotate user agents. We've seen 43 different user agents come from the same IP address in a few minutes. So they try to make it look like it's lots of different machines, but actually it's not, because they can't rotate everything. There's always a pattern that you can spot. I mean, it might even just be the sequence of the headers. There's one attack that we always get, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, but the header sequence is always post-host cookie, and customers never do that. There doesn't seem to be a set order that web browsers send the headers in, but there is a set order for one particular attacker that keeps popping up, so he's quite easy to spot. Even no matter how hard he tries with changing the user agents and distributing the attack, so he comes from, sometimes we'll see a single login from a single IP address, and then it'll come from another IP address in the botnet. So you think that's quite hard to spot, but with the attack signatures, it's really easy. Yes. No, well, actually, analysing these we are doing. I don't know a way of automating that. So logging, we use Splunk. We capture the log. We've got F5 web application firewalls, which are really good. So we log every single login request, and then we can go and do this analysis. So once we've identified an attack, we'll take a request that we know is bad, and we'll analyse the logs for that attack, and then using Splunk, we'll write a search that will. When you try, you look for things that look unusual, and then you search in Splunk, and then you for the specific sequence of headers you think is the problem, or the specific things that you think might be unique about the attack traffic, and then if you just search back for the previous week, if you can see, you know, if you're only seeing this traffic starting in when the attack started, you know you're on, you know, you found something. No, Splunk, and then we write regular expressions to capture the information there. So we're just looking at the logs in Splunk. There's no automation for it. I'd love to know how to automate it, but automation's something that we're just getting into at the moment. So we've got some. We automate some of our defences where we generate alerts in Splunk, because that's our monitoring tool, and we know how to search for things in Splunk, and our ops team know how to do that. We create alerts, and then we've got a little application that we've had a developer write for us that calls into Splunk, using the API, reads the alerts, takes the IP addresses out, and then feeds them into. We're feeding IPs into our checkpoint firewalls to block on those, and we're feeding IP addresses back into the F5 to do blocking there as well. With the checkpoints, you've kind of got block or allow. It's not great, but in the F5s, we can do something. We can be a little bit more creative. We can write I rules that will manipulate the traffic in some way. But it's interesting. So I've never been a developer, so it's hard for us to understand. Well, and automation is something kind of new to us. Most of my security ops, I haven't got anybody in the security operations side that's got a development background. So automation is something that we're trying to learn. Now we've got a developer. Well, we had a developer. He was a bit rubbish, so we binned him. But now we're recruiting another one. We're going to recruit a developer here. So we think we can get. We've got limited options for developers back in Leeds, where I'm based. So we want to look here, because we've got lots of developers here already. Someone that can help us with automating some of these tasks. Now, that would be very nervous about automating writing attack signatures, because there's a real reluctance to do anything that might risk blocking legitimate customers. You don't want to be cutting off customers, because they're the things that help us pay. They're the people that pay for all of our stuff. So we need to keep customers coming in, but there's certainly a lot more we can be doing with automation than we are doing. And once we've got a developer, we've got lots of ideas, but we just don't know how to implement them. We've got ideas and we've got lots of tools that use APIs, and I think, but I don't know how to make one API talk to another. So that's about brute force attacks. The other thing we see quite a lot of is DDoS attacks. So, right, this is not network symbols or anything like this. I used to be a soldier before, well, quite a long time ago now. I'm older than I look. But this is a great way I was able to explain DDoS attacks in a way that our HR team could understand them. So these are using NATO military symbols. Green represents the civilian population, or in our case it would be the customers. Red is the enemy, which they're always the enemy, however you look at it. Blue is our defensive positions, actually our websites. These things here are bridges. That's supposed to be a river, the blue line. And these are bridges. They represent our internet connections. So under normal operation, what happens is... my animation's not working. That's not great. Oh, there we go. Under normal operation, the civilian population are able to come down, cross our bridges, and get to our site. So everything works fine. So when we have a DDoS attack, okay, what happens there is generally the enemy get in there and they clog up our bridges, so we can't get. So when the customers come along, the civvies, they can't get onto the bridges because we've got the enemy there fighting, which takes us offline. So what we do around DDoS protection is, I'm not going to go into lots of detail about this, but I just want to explain the concepts. So what we've done for DDoS protection is we've created this buffer zone on the far side of the river, or out in the cloud. We have, so here, this is actually supposed to be reconnaissance troops, but we've got eyes on the bridges and watching the traffic here. We've got small sort of defence forces at the top there who can stop some of the traffic. And then in support, we've got the heavy armoured infantry that will come in when these guys need backup. So how this works then is when we get the normal DDoS, we get a DDoS attack, the enemy come in, but they're held at the checkpoints. Then we have the heavy, and that the quick reaction force comes in, clears up the traffic, and the civvies can still get through. So now these guys here, they can't stop every kind of attack. That filtering, but so it works for the majority of attacks that we see. And we have, since we've had this in place, we've not had any downtime or any service impact due to a DDoS attack. We've had about 12, and none of them have impacted us. So this, when we're sending in the heavy reinforcements, that can deal with every type of attack, but it's reactive. So yeah, we have to work with a DDoS provider for this. So it's an expensive service, And it isn't well like that out of the box. So some of this is service that we pay for, some of it is stuff that we made them do specifically for us. And I know that it's not things that everybody does, because I do see our competitors being affected with DDoS attacks. But worst case scenario, we will get affected. But then we've got SLAs with the service providers, so a maximum of 20 minutes for a DDoS attack. And I think in 2015, we spent, in total, it was about 4 weeks of attack time in 14 different DDoS attacks. So we don't get hit quite as often as the big financial institutions, but we do get DDoSed a lot. I think so far this year we've had about 6. Biggest DDoS attack we've had is around about 100 gig. Obviously, it's not going to make the news like the 600 gig one did a few weeks ago, but it's pretty substantial for us, especially considering it's about 50 times the bandwidth we've got going into our website. So, I suppose if we talk about how do we defend against this kind of stuff, so it's difficult. We can't stop people trying to attack us. When you talk about, I spoke recently with people from the cybercrime unit in the police in the UK, and they started talking to me about prevention. I can't prevent people in other countries trying to break into our website. I can't prevent them wanting to DDoS us and trying to extort us. That's just the best thing we can do is have mitigation strategies in place. So key thing for us, it's been a real game changer in dealing with some of these attacks, is having a web application firewall. We've got expensive hardware devices, well, and virtual ones, but you can do the same sort of thing with mod security. It's open source, it's free. It's a little bit more complicated. Like I say, I'm not a developer, I like to have a GUI. We get that with a web application firewall. DDoS mitigation, that's really important. This is something that's really, really difficult to do on your own, so you need help, because none of us can, most people are not going to be able to buy enough bandwidth to compete with what the attackers can do, unless you're Google or Amazon. So, service providers are really helpful here, either talking with your ISPs or going and paying for a bespoke service, which is what we do. Good design. So, you need to make sure that if your applications are well designed, things like that, you're encrypting where appropriately, you're not exposing services you don't need to, you're not passing sensitive data in URLs, that kind of thing. That helps mitigate some of the threats, because if it's out there, the bad guys are going to find it. And then quality assurance. It's really important that we test all of these things, and code quality has a massive part in this. It's not just, it isn't just about doing, well, I'll move on to this bit now then. So, in the old days, when we used to, when I first started on the SDLC, we'd start talking, everything was waterfall. Projects took absolutely ages. So we would design something first, everyone would agree on the design, then someone would go and build it, then we'd have functional and UAT testing, then performance testing, then penetration testing. So the penetration testing part of it, added a week on. That was an extra 5 days. It was usually, depending on the size of the application, you're talking 3 days testing and then 2 days report writing, because penetration testers spend, they want to make sure their report is QA'd and that kind of thing before they release it to you. So it's a bit of a pain. And if they find anything serious, then that would push go live back by a few days. But we didn't do lots of projects. Well, we did lots, but we didn't do as many as we do now. There wasn't as many deliveries. And it was kind of, that was just expected. But then we all got more agile. So it's hard now. We might go through these steps of something big and it's new, but then once you get past this, phase, it's basically just build and test constantly. You end up in this cycle. So we never get down to these sort of lower stages. So what we've done instead is, what we're doing now is we're getting our QA team to do the testing for us. they're testing for code quality. If they're already looking at, say, if it's a game, they're already testing to see what happens if you put negative values in on a bet. So you think if you're testing what parameters to send into a specific form field, well, why don't you just see if you can inject code into it or something else? And we combine the two, those sort of tests. That doesn't mean that we'll never do proper penetration tests. Well, proper, we won't go and bring in external penetration testing because there's compliance requirements. And sometimes things are just too high risk and we want somebody to have a proper look at it. But we're having our QA teams build the automated testing in there. Has really changed things. It's saved us time, money, and it's improved code quality because our developers are getting instant feedback when something goes wrong. They're not getting quizzed on something that they developed weeks ago, and how have you done this, and then they have to go back and work out because half the time they've moved on. So what we do is we scan code at build time. So as part of the build, we will for an application, we've got various. It's called static analysis, but there are tools out there that you can buy for this that are called. So HP45 is a good one. IBM AppScan was a good one. It's a well-known one. So we tried and tested these things, and we're all a bit rubbish. They created lots and lots of false positives, and my security architects that were working on when they were testing them, they were getting better results with less false positives using grep, which is a bit damning, and that's far cheaper. So, but if we can build that kind of thing into your testing, so we've got now integrated within our builds. We're putting in tools as part of the build process. We'll scan the code. We also scan Docker containers with an open source tool called Claire, and we do it for infrastructure as well. So as we build a server, we automatically scan it with Nessus. So we get to try and get a good understanding of the security posture of something at build time, and then you can, once the automation's all properly in place, you can fail the build. So that's really important. So you're building things securely right at the start. And then we include security stories in automated testing. All these stories and epics and that kind of thing, I'll be honest, I know the words, I don't really understand, or I don't understand why things are now stories instead of just a testing requirement. But as I was saying there, if SQL injection, for example, as a security vulnerability, that's just failing to invalidate the input on your code. And our guys are already testing that whether they're getting the right values in the code anyway. So it's very easy for them to just we use tools like there's an open source tool called BDD Security that our testers are rolling out. Now this is good because it integrates with Jenkins. It uses Cucumber, I think, is the language. But this is all kind of testing that they're already doing. But it just means it builds in fuzzing and other kinds of security tests into the work that they're already doing. So they're having a massive part in helping us stop attacks. But we were kind of running the biggest bug bounty scheme going because we're getting hundreds of people testing our code for vulnerabilities every day. But none of them come back and tell us about it, which is a little bit disappointing. But on the plus side, we don't have to pay bug bounties, I suppose. So yeah, that's it really. I think with quality assurance, getting in and getting involved in the security testing, it really helps us defend against attacks. It's increased time to market, and it's reduced costs on external pen testing. So yeah, it's important. That's it. That's all I've got to say. Has anyone got any questions? No, we've not. We've been quite lucky. I think the brute force attacks when they first started up, that was a big scare, but that's not finding vulnerabilities in the application as such. That's just abusing the functionality on it. Between that and the compliance things, that's been enough of a driver for our business. I think, or maybe they're just interested in security. I don't know, but they've had enough buy-in without us having to have a big data breach. Some companies wait. Like Sony. It's only when the CEO's in the press for because they've had a big breach that they get interested in this. And I've been lucky in that we've not had that to have a big driver on improving security. Certainly last year when TalkTalk had their breach, and again that shows how easy it is. So that was just a kid with an open source tool just trying it out on a website, and he managed to breach 160,000 customer records, and TalkTalk said in their annual report it cost them 60 million, and they lost 101,000 customers as a result of that. And there's the personal damage to the CEO because she was in the news a lot and she was getting really slated by everybody. Now our board look at that and they don't want to be in her position, so we can use other people as to scare them into doing the right thing. I mean, we don't. Well, as I say, to scare them, we don't necessarily need to do that. And if you're trying to scare people into doing the right thing, you're probably not onto a winner. But I think going back to how damaging that was, I think that's just one teenage boy who can do that kind of damage, and nobody really wants that. So. Anybody else? Yes. Yes. Well, the thing is, with the good thing about the attack signatures is once we've got them in place, it doesn't matter where they're coming from because we're being very selective about the traffic that we block. We're not even blocking every bit of traffic that comes from the attacker. We're only blocking the malicious request. So it doesn't matter then if an attacker comes from a mobile gateway, although to be honest with you, I'm not aware of an attack we have seen where they've been using mobile broadband connections. It always seems to be static DSL lines or more often than not compromised servers. We see an awful lot from like OVH, one of the biggest hosting providers. I don't want to badmouth them, but they're a massive sort of global cloud hosting provider. So we see a lot of malicious traffic from them because their customers don't secure their site properly. And it seems to be a common problem that people think, I put it in the cloud, they're all certified, they're PCI compliant, they're ISO 27001, that's really secure, but generally they aren't. They'll give you the hosting environment will be fine, but it's still up to you to how you secure the server in there, and the kind of with the hosting providers making it so easy for people to host servers and build servers and that kind of thing. Now it's kind of lowered the bar on building infrastructure, so it doesn't take as much skill as it used to be. It doesn't take as much knowledge. Anyone can do it, but the people that do it, they don't necessarily understand how to secure these things, so it's difficult. And then as well, we've got things like when you got the Internet of Things is a great example there. So there was a big DDoS a couple of weeks ago, and there was those CCTV cameras. I think 143,000 CCTV cameras involved in the 600 gig DDoS attack that happened a few weeks ago. So it's the biggest DDoS attack in history. And a big part of the botnet wasn't traditional malware-infected PCs, it was CCTV cameras. Now, I've got Google Nest at home to control my heating. I've got no idea how secure that is. I might be getting attacked by my boiler, I don't know. And that's been a bit of a pain, because we were thinking, this is really good now, I can turn my heating off while I'm not in the house. But then when I'm waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning to reboot my boiler, I think this is not good progress.